Dakota State FSA office here in Huron, South Dakota. And I have been asked today to help review the CFAP 2 program that reopened in April. We have Gail Gullickson, who is an outreach coordinator for the state of South Dakota. Our acting state director right now is Jamie White, and I am the program specialist in the FSA office in Huron that is in charge of the CFAP program. So, like I said here, the CFAP 2 program reopened in April, on April 5th to be exact. The original close date was December 11th. And with the Appropriation Act and additional funding provided, they have reopened the program to give producers that were not able to sign up the first time to give them additional time to sign up for this program. The goal for the CFAP program, it provides direct payments to producers of eligible commodities. And this program addresses the price declines and supply chain disruptions and additional market costs. It's 100% eligible payment now. Sign up, like I said, started April 5th. There's no fees to apply for this program. And these are direct payments to producers, and they are not loans. Eligible commodities for the CFAP 2 program include a very large range. Some of them include aquaculture, broilers, eggs, pullets, dairy, floriculture, nursery crops, livestock by contract growers, row crops, specialty crops, which now has added turf grass, sod, specialty livestock, which added the pullets, and then tobacco and wool. Complete list of all eligible commodities and ineligible commodities you will be able to find on the farmers.gov website under CFAP, CFAP. Because this group of producers that I'm addressing today are pretty much specialty producers in various crops, I've targeted this a little bit more towards our specialty crops that might be more attractive or be more in your wheelhouse as producers. So eligible sales commodities for CFAP 2 include aquaculture, specialty crops, and again, this is a very large list of specialty crops, and you can find that list on farmers.gov under CFAP, or this link would take you directly to the AMS listing of specialty crops. There are nursery crops and floriculture that are eligible, and then livestock that's grown for food, fiber, fur, or feathers that include alpacas, emus, llamas, bison, buffalo, beefalo, deer, elk, reindeer, ducks, geese, pheasants, goats, guinea pigs, rabbits, and ostriches are also included in these sales commodities. Some of the miscellaneous commodities that may be included would be Christmas trees, goat milk, mohair, mink, and wool. And tobacco obviously is not raised in South Dakota. Ineligible commodities for CFAP 2 would be anything with breeding stock, equine, any companion or comfort animals, including pets, commodities that are produced by contract growers, and then livestock raised for hunting or game purposes. The producer's responsibility for the program is to self-certify on the application. You would contact the FSA office, and I'll go through that a little bit later on your options to contact the office or to make application. But it is the producer's responsibility to provide self-certification on your 2019 eligible sales for the sales commodities. And your sales will include only the sales of raw commodities grown by producers. any portion of the sales that are derived from adding value to the commodity, which is adding processing or packaging or sales from products purchased for resale, should not be included in your sales. Additional income that can be included are crop insurance, indemnity payments that you may have received, any NAP payments through the FSA office, or any WIP payments that you might have gotten for any commodities. Those dollar amounts can be included in your sales. Producers who begin farming a category of sales commodities in 2020 and you do not have any 2019 sales will now actually use their actual 2020 sales at the time of your application, which now would be all the way through the 2020 crop year. The producer's actual 2020 sales must also be determined reasonable by the county FSA committee. Payment factors for sales commodities that you may apply for will determine on what your sales range are. So in this slide, it shows you the sales range and then your payment factors and how they will calculate the payments. So if you certify either 2019 sales range of up to $49,999, then we will take your sales times the payment factor of 10.6%. And this would be the same for 2020 sales also. So a payment calculation here, we take your sales commodities will be equal to the sum of the result of the amount of your producer's 2019 or 2020 sales that you enter on the AD 3117, your CFAP application, within each specified range multiplied by the payment rate for that range from the table included in the previous slide. So here's an easy example to follow. If you certified on your application that your 2019 sales were $8,265 in total sales, then we're going to take that dollar amount times that 10% payment factor and issue a payment for $876.09. And that was a brief overview of the sales commodities. So like I said, you would look at the list of sales commodities on farmers.gov CFAP and see if you raise those eligible crops. You would then take your total sales from any crops that you raise and enter those on your application and come up with your total sales and provide that information to FSA for your application. Another eligible commodity for CFAP2 is eggs. So eligible egg operations are producers who commercially market shell, dried, frozen, or liquid eggs from chickens in the US at the time of your application. Egg operations with a risk in the egg sales may be eligible for the payments. COC also has to determine who's at risk. And then any egg operations with a guaranteed price already on their eggs, they are not eligible for CFAP2. CFAP2 eligible egg production that is shell, dried, frozen, and or liquid eggs produced in the calendar year are eligible. If the eggs are sold or processed and do not already have a guaranteed payment, then they are still eligible again. And then any new egg producers that did not have 2019 production will be able to use their 2020 production for payments. When you make your application with the local FSA office, this is how you report your egg production. Egg producers self-certify to their dried, liquid, or frozen egg production, and you will do it either in pounds and in dozens for any shell eggs. And if you were an operator for 2019, use your 2019 calendar year production. Again, like I said, if you're a new producer for 2020, then you use your actual production for 2020. Calculations for the payments on eggs, we would take your either 2019 production and or your 2020 production for new producers, multiply that times 75%, and then times the rate in this below table. So for shell eggs per dozen, it would be 5 cents per dozen. Any dried, frozen, or liquid, it's based on pounds, and it would be paid accordingly. So dried eggs would be paid at 14 cents per pound. Another eligible commodity for CFAP2 are broilers. So any producer that has eligible legal entity who shares in the risk of producing this commodity is eligible. Broiler producers must be independent growers, and contract growers for this are not considered eligible under this part of the program. We'll get into contract growers a little bit later. Producers who are not in the business of broiler production at the time of your application are not considered eligible. Definition for broilers include any chicken that has been commercially produced for meat purposes that have left the farm for slaughter and not used for laying or breeding purposes. And that is the same for broiler production, is the number of head of commercially produced or meat purposes that have left the farm for slaughter and not used for laying or breeding purposes. Eligible broiler production would be for eligible producers 2019 total broiler production. And again, like we've said in the last couple slides, if you are new for 2020, then you did not have 2019 production, then you're going to use your 2020 actual broiler production on your application. Broiler payments are equal to 75% of the producer's 2019 total broiler production times a payment rate of $1.01 per bird. And the same calculation would be used if you're new for 2020. You would take your 2020 total production times the 75% times the payment rate of $1.01 per bird. Dairy operations are also eligible for CFAP2, and dairy operations that are commercially market milk from cows in the U.S. During the application are eligible. Any dairy operations that dissolve prior to your enrollment are not eligible. Eligible production is actual milk production that is commercially marketed for the months of April of 2020 through December of 2020 for the CFAP2 program, and this includes any dump milk during that time frame also. The dairy payment rate is the total milk production times 0.012 cents per pound, or $1.20 per hundredweight. And so when we do the calculation, we would take your dairy payment. Your dairy payment would be the total milk production times the 0.012 cents per pound. As I said earlier, we'd get back to contract growers. During the CFAP2 program, they included contract growers for eligible commodities such as broilers, pullets, layers, turkeys, chicken eggs, and hogs and pigs. And it would be based on your loss of your 2020 eligible revenue compared to your 2019 eligible revenue. However, when the new administration took over, there were some issues or some parts of the CFAP2 program that they put on hold, and they are now currently under review. This is one of the parts of the CFAP2 program that are on hold and under review. At this time, if you contact your FSA office, you can make an application as a contract producer. However, we would not be able to process and complete the application until the final rules are in place, and we may need further documentation or further information from you at a later date. So if you are a contract producer and want to make application, please do so. Once the final rules are established, the county office would then reach out to you and complete your application accordingly to the new rules. So what's new with the CFAP program right now when they reopened it? Basically what they added for the new rules is if you had originally applied for the CFAP 1 program a year ago and you had cattle inventory that was listed on your application, they have added a top-up payment for cattle producers based on the category that your cattle was in. These payments were issued because there was no additional sign-up required by the producers. These payments were issued right away on the 5th and 6th of April. No interaction was needed by the producers unless there was an issue with the application. So hopefully 99% of the producers have been paid at this point with your top-up cattle payments. There was also an additional top-up payment that was provided for flat rate or price trigger crops at $20 per acre. And those acres were provided on the original CFAP 2 applications during the original sign-up. And those acres were determined from producers' 578 acreage reports that were established during the 2020 crop year in the county offices. If you originally signed up for CFAP 2 and had those acres on those applications, then you have also already received this top-up payment of $20 per acre based on those applications previously approved. No producer interaction is needed for that either. And any new producers now that are just signing up for CFAP 2, if you do have any of these flat rate crops or price trigger crops based on 2020 certification in the your local office, and you did not sign up originally, we will still issue the top-up payment on those acres once you sign your application and establish your eligibility for the CFAP 2 program. You will also get the original payment that would be triggered for the CFAP 2 crop payments. Eligibility by producers. So a lot of times, especially with specialty crops, you might not be a regular FSA producer on the farm records, and that's okay. You can now establish your records in an FSA office by contacting them. We will determine your eligibility, get your paperwork that you need to complete, and get you established in our farm records system. You can apply for only commercially produced commodities if you want, and that'll be up to you, however you feel fit in completing your applications. When you do apply, conservation compliance and wetland compliance is a required part of the eligibility. Also, any non-citizens of the U.S. that have an I-551 card must also provide significant contribution to capital, land, and active personal labor to be eligible. And we determine that by producers filing an 902 form, which tells us how they operate in the farming community, whether you operate as an entity or an individual. One other form that is also required when signing up for CFAP would be a 941 form, an adjusted gross income form. And that form will be based, producers are eligible if they make $900,000 or less based on a 3-year average. If the producer or entity applying makes more than that, but 75% of their income is derived from farming and or ranching, then there is an additional form that would need to be completed and certified that this is the case, and then you would also be eligible for program benefits. Payment limitations for entities and producers are limited to $250,000 per person and entity. The one exception that we do have for the CFAP program, and this is only for the CFAP program, is if you are an entity, an LLC, a limited liability company, limited partnership, a corporation or trust or an estate, and maybe you have individual members, will go down to the fourth level of membership, that provide 400 plus hours of either active labor, active personal management, and or a combination of. And if those members can be identified, at least 2 members, then the payment limitation for this entity could be as high as $750,000, depending on the number of members that qualify under that. And I would recommend, if you are a very large entity and you have members that may meet this eligibility requirement, visit with your FSA office while you're making your application and get the specific guidelines and what is required to meet this payment limitation increase. When you're applying for CFAP, there are 3 different ways that we can accept an application. First, if you are an existing FSA producer, you may already have an eAuth account that is established. And by that, that gives you the privilege of applying online without calling the FSA office and having them do your application. You can log into your eAuth account and sign in and complete your application and submit via online. Another way that you can apply is you can actually get onto the farmers.gov website. You can download an application, an AD 3117 CFAP application. You can complete it on your own, and then you can either submit that application once you sign it, either box software back to the office. You can mail it via US mail service. You can email it, or you can hand deliver the application back to the office. And then also another way that you can make application now, which is probably our most popular way due to the inability for producers to just walk in the offices at this time, you can call your local FSA office. Sometimes they might request that you make an appointment so that they can have all the paperwork in front of them in order to complete an interview with you on the phone and help you complete the application via phone. At that point, once they help you complete the application, then they may email it to you. They may send you a box invite and return the application via box, and you would return it electronically, or you can also use the U.S. Postal Service to complete that application and return all your documents to the local FSA office. At this time, we've also got a call center that is set up. It was specifically set up a year ago for CFAP application nationwide. And if you had any just little simple questions that you might want to ask, am I eligible for this crop, or are my chickens eligible, or whatever the case may be, this is a general call-in center for generalized questions. And the number here is listed, 877-508-8364. If you have in this general's call-in center, if the producer or the person on the other end cannot answer your question, at some point they might be able to directly transfer you to your local FSA center to get a better specialized and specific answered question that would pertain to the area and your local county. Any producers that may have any language barriers, they can use this call-in center also, and they can ask for interpretation. And that is also a benefit to using the call-in center. As kind of a wrap up here, anybody who applies for the CFAP program, whatever part of the application that you would complete, like we've discussed previously, it's all self-certification at this time. We're not requiring documentations from you to prove your inventory or your sales of your commodities at this time. However, we do want you to make sure that you have documentation on file and keep it set aside, because we never know if any of our producers are ever going to be picked for a spot check. National office will come out with at some point a list of applications that have been approved and paid, and that we need to contact and reach out to you producers and ask for documentation as a spot check to back up your original numbers on your applications. So it's always a good idea to keep that on hand, just in case anybody would ever question. If you never get a call, then we'll never need the documentation, but it would just be good to have it on hand. Some of the documentation that would be good to have on hand to back up any of your application numbers, if ever questioned, are listed here. So if you've applied for livestock, any type of inventory records that you have on hand that would apply to the time period that you are applying for listing your inventory on the application, keep those on record. Contract growers at this time right now, what they're saying is any grower agreements, have those on file. Also, make sure you have your revenue records from 2019 and 20 on hand. Any specialty crops that producers are applying for, the sales commodities, make sure you have your 2019 sales records on hand, or for any new producers, make sure you have your 2020 sales records on hand. Also, if you have included any crop insurance indemnity payments or NAP payments or WIP payments in your sales numbers, make sure you have that documentation on file. Any producers that receive any of that, any of those payments, do get a record in the mail when those payments are made. So keep that with your records also. And then, of course, if you're applying for dairy, make sure you have your milk marketing statements for April through December on hand, and any records of any dump milk for April through December of 2020 on hand also. So what happens after you sign up and you have submitted your application? Basically, producers also will receive the eligibility documents that need to be submitted to make sure they are eligible. And I briefly reviewed those earlier. That would be your sod swamp and wetland conservation compliance forms, which is an AD 1026, 902 for payment limitation to describe the entity and or the individual operation that's making applications, and your AGI forms, which is the $900,000 income, average income certification. And from the date you sign your application, you have 60 days to provide those additional eligibility documents and make sure that they are all signed and up to date with the local office. Sometimes there might be some missing information. The FSA office will reach out to you and let you know if there's information missing and give you an opportunity to provide that additional documents. And once all of this is signed and up to date, then your applications are approved and then payments will be issued accordingly. All payments are issued through direct deposit. So if you, again, are a new FSA producer, the local FSA office will also request a direct deposit form to be completed by you and to be entered into our system so we can make the payments direct deposit to your bank. And that is a brief overview of the different applications or different parts of the CFAP program that you could be available to be eligible for. Again, I would highly encourage you reach out to a local FSA office in your area and start the paperwork or start the process by visiting with them. They can provide you with all the documentation, answer your questions, and hopefully successfully complete an application and issue payments for the CFAP 2 program. And with that, that is the end of my training for today. Thank you very much, and let us know if you have any questions.